Hi, I'm Aveline. On my 20th birthday, my parents pushed me out the front door while I was still in my wheelchair. They didn't whisper it. They shouted, "You're a disgrace! Get out and die wherever you end up." No suitcase, no goodbye, just the sound of the door slamming. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. But by morning, $96 million hit my account. And that was the moment everything changed. You think blood makes a family? Mine thought I'd stay silent forever. So tell me, what would you do if the ones who raised you were the same ones who ruined you? The ocean outside the Vale Villa was calm that evening, the kind of quiet that made you think peace existed, until you stepped inside. The house smelled of lilies, champagne, and something sharper underneath, tension. I sat near the end of the long dining table, the only one seated in a wheelchair. The lights shimmered above polished silverware, and laughter bounced off marble walls, but it never reached me. It was my 20th birthday. My mother, Regina, had planned the dinner herself. She said it would be intimate, just family and a few friends. Yet when I looked around, every eye that met mine quickly turned away. My dress was new, soft blue silk that she'd chosen. I looked proper, graceful even, but invisible. She didn't meet my eyes once. My father, Charles, kept his attention on the wine glass in front of him, swirling it as if there was an answer somewhere in its dark reflection. "Let's raise a toast," my mother said finally, her voice sharp enough to slice through the quiet. Her smile looked rehearsed. "To family and to learning one's place." People chuckled awkwardly. I didn't understand what she meant, but my stomach tightened. When she stood to speak again, something in her face changed, like a mask dropping. "You've embarrassed us for the last time, Aveline." The sound of my name, spoken like that, was enough to still every whisper in the room. Forks hit plates. My heart kicked against my ribs. "What?" I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Charles cleared his throat, his tone empty. "We can't keep you here anymore. You've become too much of a burden." A burden. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air in the room went heavy. Someone at the far end whispered, "Is she serious?" Another voice. Poor thing. I wanted to stand up, to scream that I'd done nothing wrong, that my being in this chair wasn't something I chose. But my hands just gripped the wheels, white-knuckled, frozen. Mother kept going, calm now, almost rehearsed. "We've tried to be patient, but it's time you learned responsibility. You can't stay here, not like this. You need to find your own way." The words, "find your own way," hung in the air like an insult. She turned to my father, who nodded, slowly as though he were agreeing to a business deal, not erasing his daughter. Then she reached into her clutch and pulled out a small envelope. "Your gift," she said. I took it, my hands trembling. Inside was a folded letter and a bus ticket, one way, to Jacksonville. The letter said, in her perfect cursive, "Don't come back." Someone near the door gasped. My vision blurred for a second, not from tears, but from disbelief. I looked at her, hoping, just hoping, that this was a sick joke. But she just tilted her chin slightly, that familiar expression of pride and disgust blending into one. "You're a disgrace, Aveline. Go rot somewhere else." That was when I noticed the cake. It sat untouched in the center of the table, candles still flickering, one of them half melted, dripping wax like tears onto the frosting. The flame wavered but didn't die. I stared at it longer than I should have, holding onto that tiny light like it was the last bit of warmth I'd ever get from this house. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, I turned my chair toward the door. The wheels squeaked on the marble floor, an ugly, human sound in a room full of polite silence. As I rolled past my mother, she looked the other way. My father lifted his glass again, pretending to study the wine's color. Outside, the Florida night met me like a wall, thick, humid, the smell of salt and rain in the air. Behind me, laughter started again, forced and brittle, like nothing had happened. I paused under the front porch light. For a moment, I thought someone might come after me. But the only sound was distant music from the party, muffled through the walls. I took a breath, deep and shaky, and started down the path. The driveway stretched long and empty, the ocean whispering beyond the dunes. I didn't have a plan. Just the envelope in my lap, a few bills in my purse, and a phone with a dead battery. When thunder rolled across the sky, it didn't scare me. It felt like a witness, loud enough to say what I couldn't. That night, I had nowhere to go. But fate, it turned out, had other plans waiting in my inbox. I didn't sleep much that night. Between the flickering motel ceiling light and the thrum of passing cars outside, rest never came easy. But the real reason I couldn't close my eyes was far simpler. How do you sleep after your own parents tell you you're nothing? The bed was stiff, the blanket thin. At some point between 3 a.m. and dawn, I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember was the call of seagulls pulling me into the gray morning. My neck ached, and my arm had gone numb from the awkward position I'd curled into. I sat up slowly, disoriented for a moment. It wasn't home. It never would be again. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and glanced around the room. Peeling wallpaper, a dripping faucet, and the low hum of the AC that sounded like it might give up any second. My wheelchair sat in the corner beside the bed, silent, waiting. I reached for my phone. The battery had just enough juice after charging through the motel's cracked outlet all night. The screen lit up, casting a pale glow that reminded me too much of the candle I'd stared at last night. My inbox buzzed with notifications I didn't care to read. Grocery ads, junk mail, some newsletter from a yoga place I'd never visited. I almost put it down when I saw it. Bank transfer complete, $96,000. I blinked. At first, I laughed. Quiet, dry, obviously spam. Some cruel scam built to prey on people like me. I clicked anyway, because what else did I have to lose? But then I saw the sender, Althea Greaves Trust. My breath caught. My Aunt Althea, my mother's estranged sister, had passed away nearly 2 years ago. I hadn't even been allowed to attend her funeral. She made her choices, my mother had said back then. She left this family a long time ago. But Aunt Althea never left me. When I was a kid, she used to visit in secret, bringing me books, puzzles, and peppermint sticks. She'd once crouched beside my wheelchair and said something I hadn't thought about in years. Someday, your silence will be the loudest thing in this family. My hands trembled as I opened the attached document. Recipient: Aveline Grace Vale. Amount $96,000. Assets: full estate ownership, including primary Sarasota property, trust portfolios, and liquid funds. Then came the clause that changed everything. Condition of disclosure. You must not inform your parents until they have revealed their true hearts. True hearts? I set the phone down, staring at the mottled motel ceiling like it might give me answers. So, that dinner wasn't just the end, it was the beginning. A test, one they failed with flying colors. I was the legal owner of the house they'd thrown me out of. The same one where my mother stood over my birthday cake and told me to go rot. The same walls my father watched me wheel away from without a word. I wanted to scream, laugh, cry, but none of it came out. All I could do was sit there, stunned. The silence was no longer helpless. It was heavy, powerful. A knock on the door startled me. I didn't move, just waited until whoever it was gave up. The motel staff probably, or someone looking for the last girl who'd stayed in this room. I turned my focus back to the phone and dialed the number in the email. A direct line to Tobias West, the lawyer my aunt had trusted. It rang twice before a warm, calm voice answered. "Miss Vale?" "Yes, this is Aveline. I was wondering when you'd call. Althea made me promise not to reach out first. She said you'd find me when you were ready." "Is it real?" I asked, still unsure I hadn't imagined all of it. "Very real," he said. "You are now the legal owner of the Vale estate and every asset attached to the trust. Everything your aunt built, she left it to you." I leaned back against the creaking headboard, eyes burning with unshed tears. The weight of what I'd lost and what I'd just found hit all at once. "Miss Vale," Tobias added gently, "do you want to begin proceedings today?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, let's begin." For a moment I just stared at my reflection in the dusty mirror across the room. My hair was messy, eyes puffy, face pale. But behind all that, I saw something else. Resolve. All my life, I'd been taught to stay quiet, be polite, not cause trouble. And still, I was cast aside like garbage. But now, I had the power to speak, not with words, but with action. I packed slowly, methodically. Folded my dress from the night before into the bag, picked up the letter my mother had written, the one that said, "Don't come back." I folded that too. It would be useful later. As I rolled toward the door, phone still in hand, the soft light from the screen lit up my path. A strange echo of that stubborn candle on the birthday cake. I paused. If Althea was watching, I hoped she knew. I heard her, loud and clear. But to take back what was mine, I had to walk into the same house that threw me out. The drive up the coast was quiet, just the low hum of the engine and the rhythm of the tires against the pavement. I sat in the back seat of the black sedan Tobias had arranged, my phone resting on my lap, the document still open on the screen. Everything felt surreal, too calm, too clean for what I was walking into. As we turned onto the familiar road leading to the beachfront villa, I saw the palm trees lining the driveway, just as they always had. Same manicured lawn, same stucco walls glowing under the early afternoon sun. Nothing had changed, except me. The driver parked smoothly. He opened the door for me and offered a hand. I took it, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to steady my breath. My heels touched the gravel driveway. That was the first time in years I walked up to that house without the sound of wheels beneath me. The breeze carried the scent of salt water and wet sand, and for a fleeting second I let it ground me. Every step toward the front door was deliberate. My heartbeat wasn't frantic, it was firm, paced like a war drum. I raised my hand and knocked. 3 times. It only took a few seconds before the door cracked open. My mother stood there, frozen like she'd seen a ghost. Her hand still clutched the brass doorknob. She didn't say my name. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice low but edged with panic. I looked her in the eyes, calmly. "I came to collect what's mine." She opened the door a little wider, blocking the entry with her body. "You don't get to just show up after everything." Behind her, my father appeared, his posture tense. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Aveline, you need to leave," he said quickly. "This isn't the time." "You're right," I replied, stepping forward. "Time's up." They moved aside, confused, but not yet scared. They still thought I was bluffing, that I came for closure, for drama, for something emotional. They had no idea I held the deed to the very floor beneath their feet. I stepped inside and the air hit different. The smell was still lemon polish and sea breeze, but the memories carried weight. The hallway walls still displayed family photos in shiny frames. Birthday parties, vacations, holidays. But not a single photo of me remained. It was like I'd never existed here. They'd erased me. I walked past the kitchen and down the hallway where I used to leave marks on the wall. Tiny grooves from the wheels of my chair scraping the plaster. I stopped and traced one with my fingers. It was faint now, painted over but not quite gone. They couldn't scrub it all away. Behind me, I heard Regina's heels click against the floor. "This is still our home," she hissed. "I don't know what game you think you're playing." A sound interrupted her. Her phone buzzed from the counter. She picked it up, her face drawn. "Hello? Yes, this is Regina Vale." Silence. Then her brow furrowed. "What do you mean the card was declined? That's impossible. Try it again." Another pause. Then something cracked in her voice. "What do you mean our accounts are frozen?" She looked at me, eyes wide now. I said nothing at first, just met her stare even. "They won't work," I said simply. "Not until I say so." Charles stepped forward. "This isn't funny. You don't just show up and pull some kind of stunt." "It's not a stunt," I interrupted, sharp but measured. "I own this house, the accounts, everything. Aunt Althea left it all to me." Regina blinked like she'd been slapped. "You can't just—" She was senile near the end, you know that? "She wasn't," I cut her off. "She was the only person who ever saw me. And now I see you both. Clearly." The silence stretched between us, taut like a thread about to snap. Charles softened his voice, shifting tactics. "We're family, Aveline. Let's not do something we can't walk back." I took a breath. "You stopped being my family the moment you handed me that envelope and told me to rot." Regina's face twisted. "You were always dramatic." "No," I said. "I was quiet. There's a difference." I turned and walked toward the door, the click of my steps echoing in the foyer. I stopped, looked back once. "This house never forgot me," I said, touching the wall lightly where my chair had left its mark. "You did." I opened the door and stepped outside. The air felt lighter somehow, like the ocean had waited for me to breathe again. The same door they slammed behind me days ago, now closed by my choice, and I didn't look back when it did. But power never changes hands quietly, especially in this family. The morning air carried a stillness that felt almost staged, like everything was holding its breath. I stood barefoot in the kitchenette of my temporary apartment, holding a mug of tea I hadn't sipped. The wide window overlooked the ocean. From up here, the water looked calm, but I'd lived long enough to know that calm doesn't mean safe. Last night played over in my mind, not like a movie, but like a scent that wouldn't leave the room. The way Regina's face froze when her world shifted, the way Charles didn't defend me, again, and the weight of finally walking out that door on my own terms. I didn't regret it, but power never changes hands quietly, especially in this family. My phone buzzed on the counter. Tobias. I answered on the second ring. "Morning." "You're going to want to sit down," he said, skipping pleasantries. I placed the mug down and leaned against the countertop. "Go ahead." "They've filed a motion this morning, attempting to freeze the trust, claiming you're mentally unfit to manage the estate." There was a brief silence, but not because I was shocked. I was processing. Then I exhaled slowly through my nose. "Of course they did," I muttered. "They're leveraging past medical records from when you were hospitalized at 16, he added. "Incomplete records taken out of context." My grip tightened on the phone. "They're building the narrative," Tobias continued, "and fast. I got a tip they've contacted a few local outlets." Not 10 minutes later, I saw it for myself. On the TV across the room, local news cut to a segment titled, "Billionaire Heiress or Troubled Young Woman." The screen flashed old images of me in the wheelchair. The voiceover was gentle, but the words weren't. Then came Regina. Her expression was soft, careful, dressed in worry. She looked like a grieving mother, not a calculating one. "All we ever wanted was to protect Aveline from herself," she said, pausing just enough to sound genuine. "But outside influences, they've convinced her that we're the enemy. We just want her safe." I muted the television. I'd seen enough. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen. My face overlapped with hers for a second. Me on mute, her spilling lies to the world. I didn't throw the remote. I didn't cry. Instead, I sat on the edge of the sofa and opened my laptop. A new message from Tobias. Subject line, Althea's final gift. Inside was a folder, documents, court transcripts, photos. One image stopped me cold. It was a black and white still from a courtroom, dated years before I was born. Regina sat in the gallery, smiling faintly. The caption read, "Hearing on Declaration of Incapacity. Eleanor Greaves. My great-aunt." In the notes, "History of using mental health accusations to silence family members." Eleanor had opposed the family's investment direction. Regina led the effort to have her declared unstable. She'd succeeded. The pattern was clear. I wasn't their first target. I was just the first one who fought back. I stared at the documents. Everything was there. Proof of manipulation, of character assassinations, of Regina's obsession with control. The trust's medical file on me was updated and complete. I was not, and had never been, mentally incompetent. But they were counting on public doubt. I reached for my phone and dialed Tobias again. "I'm not fighting them in the press," I said. "Let them bury themselves in the noise. But I want you to prepare everything. We're not dragging them down. We're showing people who they already are." "You want to file your own suit?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want to set the stage, and I want the truth to go viral." He was silent a moment. Then, "Understood." I stayed on the line with him a little longer, working through details. By the time we hung up, my tea was cold, but I didn't care. Later that day, I walked through downtown, sunglasses on, coat collar up. A few people turned their heads. I didn't know if they recognized me from the segment or just noticed my limp. I didn't flinch. I stopped at a florist, picked out a single white tulip, Althea's favorite, and left it at the courthouse steps. Then I crossed the street to Tobias's office. He had the plan, the documents, the trail. But the weapon wasn't a lawsuit. It was the truth. The truth had teeth. And that morning, it was finally starting to bite. Tobias's office sat tucked between a sandwich shop and a dentist's office, an unassuming brick building with narrow windows that let in filtered morning light. The kind of place no one would notice unless they were looking for it. I'd come early, couldn't sleep, couldn't sit still. Inside, the smell of old paper and furniture polish met me like a memory. He motioned me to the back, where boxes lined the walls like soldiers waiting to be called. No greetings, no small talk, just an envelope, aged, thick, yellowing at the edges. He held it out. "She left this for you," Tobias said, "only to be opened if things turned bad." I took it with both hands. It had my name written in her handwriting. Althea's script, sharp, elegant, never rushed. The flap resisted for a moment, then gave. Inside were medical files, sealed with hospital tags from nearly a decade ago. I scanned the first few pages, familiar jargon, until something caught. A highlighted note, dated during my rehabilitation, read, "Sedatives to be continued per guardian's request for safety and emotional stability. Guardian, Regina Vale." My stomach turned. Another file, stapled to the back, carried a private memo from a physician, one I vaguely remembered, always calm, always distant. Physical recovery viable, patient showing responsiveness. Recommend reduction of sedation and motor therapy acceleration. But that therapy never happened. The reduction never came. I blinked at the page, my fingers trembling slightly. Tobias didn't speak. He didn't need to. I looked up and forced my voice to stay level. "She paid them to keep me weak." He nodded once. "There's more." He stepped away and returned with a smaller, flat file. Inside, stapled to a legal packet, was a trust transfer, dated when I was 17. A signature at the bottom read Aveline Vale, but I didn't remember signing it. Tobias pointed. That signature's not yours, and the notary listed doesn't exist. I stared at the paper, then back at him. She stole my inheritance. Your mother committed felony fraud, he said simply. It didn't feel like a bomb dropping. It felt like the slow realization you'd been breathing in smoke for years, never noticing until the room cleared. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. The paper crinkled in my grip. All those years, I whispered, every time I thought I was just unlucky or weak or broken. I looked down at my legs, stronger now, steadier, and then back at the forged signature. The ink wasn't just fake. It was a theft of identity, a theft of voice. They didn't just paralyze me, I said. They planned it. Flashbacks hit me, not as vivid scenes, but as emotional landmines. The years I spent half awake, foggy, apologizing for things I didn't do. Nights I'd wake up and couldn't remember how I fell asleep. And Althea's visits, rare, quiet, always full of questions that felt more like messages. I'm proud of you, she once told me, brushing a strand of hair from my face. And someday the truth will stand taller than any of them. At the time, I thought she was just being kind, but now I saw her warnings, the files, the trust, everything she left, planted like seeds, waiting for the storm. I folded the papers slowly, carefully, and returned them to the envelope. Then I stood. I'm not releasing any of this, I said. Tobias looked surprised. You're not? Not yet, I clarified. If I expose them now, they'll spin it. Cry victim. Call me unstable. Again. He nodded slowly. So what's the move? I crossed the room and looked out the window. The bay shimmered in the distance, untouched by the ugliness in this office. They think they're winning, I said. Let's keep it that way. Tobias said nothing, but I could feel his concern behind me. They built this entire game on lies, I continued, but it only takes one truth, timed right, to bring the whole thing down. I paused. I want them to feel untouchable, comfortable. That's when they'll get sloppy. There was a long silence between us. Then Tobias stepped forward. You're sure about this? I turned to face him. My voice didn't shake. I'm done being unsure. He gave a tight nod. Then I'll start building the timeline, quietly. I gave him a small smile, tired but steady. Good. As I stepped out into the Florida sun, the heat wrapped around me like a second skin. I held the envelope to my chest, not for comfort, but for reminder. They thought I was broken. They had no idea what I knew. And now I was about to use it. That morning, I arrived at Tobias's office just after 8. The sun was already high, casting a soft glare on the glass walls, but inside it was cool and still. He waved me in without a word. There was a thin manila folder already sitting open on his desk. No greeting, no pleasantries. Take a look at this, he said, pushing the papers toward me. I sat, pulled the file closer. The top document was a copy of the villa's deed, original, official, sealed. My eyes scanned each line until something in the lower corner caught me. There, barely noticeable, typed in small print, Trustee, Aveline G. Vale, not Regina, not Charles, just me. I looked up, not saying anything, letting the silence confirm what my heart was beginning to suspect. Tobias leaned back. Althea transferred the deed years ago in secret. She left it in the trust, sealed and timed. It didn't become active until her passing. But legally, this house has been yours the whole time. It felt like gravity shifted under my feet. For a second, I didn't speak. I couldn't. Years, literal years. My parents strutted through that villa like monarchs, hosted galas, punished me with silence under its roof, built their pride and public image on it. And all that time, They were living in something that never belonged to them. I reached for the corner of the file again and turned the page. Another copy. Another date. The deeds update occurred just 2 months after I turned 18. They never even looked? I asked. Tobias gave a half smile. They assumed it was theirs. No one challenged them. No one would dare. I stared down at the paper, and for a moment I was 12 again, back at the groundbreaking ceremony. That day was burned into me. I remember sitting in my wheelchair under the canopy, the Florida heat pressing against my skin. Regina wore white linen and a wide-brimmed hat. Charles gave a speech about legacy and vision. Reporters took pictures. Everyone clapped. Althea sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. No cameras pointed our way. I didn't mind. Someday, she whispered that day, you'll own everything they built on your silence. Back then, I didn't even know what that meant. But now I did. I stood up. My legs were solid, clear. Not one part of me was the dependent girl they tried to freeze in place. I'm ready, I told Tobias. He nodded. The trust's real estate attorney is already waiting. All we need is your signature. 15 minutes later, the paperwork was in motion. The villa, my villa, was formally listed for private sale under my authority. We kept it quiet, off-market, discreet. And every cent from that sale, it would fund the Althea Greaves Foundation for Women's Recovery. The name alone would be enough to salt their wounds. Tobias handed me a stylus to sign the final document on his tablet. I took a long breath, signed with slow, deliberate strokes. It felt like closure, and also a beginning. As we finalized the transfer, my phone buzzed again, and again. 23 missed calls, all from one number, Regina. I didn't answer. I didn't even open the message thread. Let her wonder. Let her sweat. I did type one sentence into a new draft, though. Just one line I wasn't ready to send yet. It's not revenge, Mother. It's ownership. By late afternoon, I stepped outside. The ocean breeze hit me softly, like a memory rather than a force. I didn't head back to the apartment. I took the long walk down the beach path until I found the stretch of sand that faced the villa directly. From there, I could see it. The windows glowing from inside, the laughter echoing faintly through the wind. Probably another family dinner. Maybe some wine. Maybe Charles telling one of his recycled stories about earning everything we have. I stood there for a while. The tide lapped at my ankles. They had no idea that by morning it would all be over. Let them enjoy their last night in that house, because it wasn't theirs anymore. I stood there on the shore just a little longer, letting the night soak into my bones. The breeze carried the scent of salt and wet sand, and the villa glowed like a dream someone else was still clinging to. I turned away before the light could warm me, before I could start feeling anything close to mercy. By the time I got back to the apartment, it was almost midnight. Tobias had texted, "Sale confirmed, documents filed." I didn't reply. I just powered down my phone and went to sleep with the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. That calm didn't last. By 6 a.m., my phone was vibrating off the nightstand. I rubbed my eyes, still half asleep, and saw it, hundreds of notifications. Every social app was exploding. A clip of my mother crying on morning television had gone viral overnight. She was seated across from a local anchor, wearing a soft lavender blouse and dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Her voice cracked as she said, "We tried to protect her. We loved her. But our daughter, she stole our home while we were trying to save her life." The caption read, "Heartbroken parents speak out." I scrolled through the comments, each one sharper than the last. Disgusting. She's using her disability for sympathy. What kind of monster evicts her own family? Ungrateful little witch. There it was again. That ache I knew too well. The invisible bruise just under the skin, the shame that used to curl me into silence. But I didn't feel shame this time. I felt fire. "They've never told the truth about me," I whispered to myself. "Why would they start now?" I opened my laptop and logged into the private archive Aunt Althea had built. Every document, every photo, every time-stamped record. It wasn't just proof, it was legacy. At 9:07 a.m., Tobias called. "They've filed for an emergency injunction," he said, without preamble. "They're trying to freeze the sale. Court hearings at 2 o'clock. I didn't ask if I had to go. I just asked what to wear. By 1:45 p.m., I was walking into the courtroom, calm and collected in a charcoal dress suit. No wheelchair, no limp, no hesitation. Regina was already there, pearls at her throat, eyes rimmed with perfectly applied tears. Charles sat stiffly beside her, looking at anything but me. The room was packed, reporters, court clerks, even a few curious locals leaning in. Regina stood to speak first. Her voice trembled on cue. "She's not well," she told the judge. "She's been manipulated. Look at her. She's angry, unstable, vindictive. We've tried for years to keep her safe. We gave her everything." She turned slightly toward me, her tone a mix of maternal pity and moral outrage. "And this is how she repays us." I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just waited. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, deliberately. The room hushed. I walked to the front of the room without support, heels clicking against tile like a metronome of control. The folder in my hand was thin but heavy with truth. I opened it. Inside, my full medical history, signed and sealed. Documents proving my mental competence. A notarized record of the trust transfer, bank statements, forged signatures, and a copy of the villa deed naming me sole trustee. I handed it all to the clerk and looked at the judge. "I was disabled," I said quietly. "Not blind. I've seen everything." A wave of whispers spread through the room. Regina's face lost all its color. Charles finally looked at me, mouth slightly open but no words coming out. The hearing ended with no injunction granted. The judge had barely glanced at Regina's claims before dismissing them. By the time Tobias and I stepped back outside, reporters were shouting questions, shoving microphones. We didn't stop. We didn't need to. An hour later, Tobias uploaded everything to the press. Every record, every proof, every lie. By dinner time, Trust and Justice for Aveline was trending. News anchors backpedaled. Opinion pieces shifted tone. Those same influencers who had called me ungrateful now gushed about bravery, resilience, taking back power. I didn't read most of it. Noise is still noise, even when it's finally in your favor. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment as rain tapped gently on the glass. The storm outside had softened to mist, like the sky had finally run out of things to shout. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and watched the headlights of cars blur into the wet street below. "I didn't win," I whispered to myself. "I just stopped losing." My phone buzzed again. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. One line. "You think this is over?" "It's not." I didn't flinch. Of course it wasn't over. But this time, I wouldn't be the one hiding. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in long, golden stripes across the conference table. My reflection stared back at me in the glass wall of the Gulf State Bank's executive office. Steady, unshaken, and nothing like the girl they once threw out. Across from me sat the banker, his tie too tight for comfort, his expression rehearsed. He cleared his throat before speaking, glancing at the document between us. "Miss Vale," he said, "as of this morning, all accounts linked to Regina and Charles Vale are officially frozen under trust order. The audit has confirmed the misappropriation of assets." He paused, waiting for my reaction. I gave him none. "Would you like to proceed with the authorization?" "Yes." My voice was calm. The kind of calm you earn after losing everything once. I picked up the pen, the one Tobias had placed beside the file, and signed my name at the bottom of the order. The click of the pen sounded final, not angry, not triumphant. Just done. Tobias, sitting a few seats down, exhaled quietly. "That's it," he said. "They no longer have access to anything. Not the accounts, not the credit lines, not even the villa's maintenance fund." I nodded once. Good. Because it wasn't about taking something away anymore. It was about balance, justice, not vengeance. The next meeting happened in the same room 2 hours later. This one wasn't about freezing money, it was about freeing it. "The recovered funds," Tobias began, "total roughly $62 million after liquidation. Where do you want it transferred?" I looked out the window toward the Gulf, sunlight rippling across the water like silver threads. "To a foundation," I said. "In my aunt's name." He leaned back, curious. "The Althea Grace Foundation?" I nodded. "Mobility programs for disabled youth. Wheelchairs, prosthetics, therapy scholarships, everything that was denied to me because of their choices." He smiled faintly, the first real one I'd seen from him in weeks. "You're turning their greed into grace," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm turning their silence into motion. They took my legs to keep me still. I'll use their money to help others move." The rest of the meeting passed quietly. Numbers were just details now. The real change had already happened. Inside me. By late afternoon, the sky had turned pale and the office lights dimmed. My phone rang. The name flashing on the screen made the room feel suddenly colder. Regina. I didn't answer at first. I let it ring. And ring again. Then, curiosity won. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Aveline." Her voice cracked on the first syllable. "Honey, please. Our cards don't work. The bank, your father's medication. We can't." I let her talk. I listened the way I had on my 20th birthday, when she told me to rot somewhere else. Her words stumbled into sobs. "Please, we're sorry. We didn't mean." I closed my eyes, not from pain, but from memory. Then I spoke, quietly, evenly. "Now you know what helpless feels like." Silence filled the line, then the faint sound of her crying before the call ended. I didn't save the number. That night, I drove back to the villa. One last time. The gates opened with a creak that echoed down the long driveway. Inside, the house felt smaller, almost hollow. No laughter, no tension, just empty walls that once listened to every cruel word. I walked through each room, letting the memories settle where they belonged. Behind me. In the dining room, I placed an envelope on the table. On the front, written in my neat, deliberate hand, "For Regina and Charles Vale." Inside was a copy of the trust deed, a notarized statement of transfer, and a handwritten note. "I forgive you, but I will never forget." The air was still when I stepped outside. Before leaving, I opened the small storage shed near the driveway. Inside, covered with dust and a forgotten blanket, was my old wheelchair, the one from that night. Its wheels were stiff, its seat cracked, but it was still there. I wheeled it out to the front gate and faced it toward the ocean. The waves were rolling in softly, like applause that had taken its time. "You were my prison," I whispered. "Now you'll watch me walk away." I turned, walked back to the car, and didn't look back. 3 days later, the headlines broke across every major outlet. Heiress turns family scandal into philanthropy for disabled youth. The Althea Grace Foundation launches with $62 million endowment. The interviews came fast, but I only agreed to one. A local reporter asked what forgiveness meant to me. I said, "Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom, from people who feed on your pain. I don't want revenge, I just don't want to carry them anymore." She nodded, eyes glistening, and the camera lights dimmed. That night, I sat by the window again. The same ocean stretched out before me, calm now, almost kind. Somewhere, that old wheelchair still faced the shore. And I smiled knowing it was watching the tide move, something I'd finally learned to do. The morning breeze drifted in as I returned from my walk, sneakers damp from the dew along the coastal trail. The sun was just beginning to warm the pavement outside my front door. As I reached for the handle, I noticed it, a plain white envelope resting at the base of the mailbox, tucked just under the flap. No return address, no stamp. 2 words in delicate, slanted cursive stared back at me. I'm sorry, I knew that handwriting. My fingers hesitated, then curled around it. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. Not to be opened, not yet. It sat beside a framed photo of Aunt Althea, the corners worn from where I'd touched it too many times. She would have said, "Let the truth come in on its own legs, not yours." And so, I waited. That year, life didn't get easier, it just got fuller. The Althea Grace Foundation expanded faster than we expected. We started with 10 kids, 10 children whose lives had been slowed by trauma, poverty, injury. By spring, we'd helped nearly 70. Fitted wheelchairs, mobility grants, even training centers across 3 counties. Every ribbon we cut felt like a stitch pulled out of a wound I'd carried far too long. I didn't lead with speeches or spotlights. I walked beside them, literally, 1 foot in front of the other, past the ghosts that used to whisper, "You'll never be enough." The media kept circling, but I declined most interviews. I didn't need to defend my truth anymore. Sometimes, during events, I'd step away and just observe. The laughter, the momentum, the joy that came from motion. I often heard people say, "She's so composed." What they didn't realize was that peace had replaced the noise. It was at our summer gala that the past returned in a form I didn't expect. Polished, upright, dignified in a way only memory can be. At the far end of the ballroom stood a display, surrounded by soft lights and framed testimonials. In the center sat my old wheelchair, not the broken one from that hospital room, but fully restored. Tobias had arranged it as a surprise, labeled beneath it, "Where the journey began." I hadn't seen it in over a year. Seeing it again sent a ripple through me. I walked over slowly, pressed my palm against the worn armrest, now repainted and smooth. I remembered every insult spoken while I sat in it, every dinner I was excluded from, every time I wasn't believed. And then I whispered, "You carried me until I could carry myself." And I meant it. Later that night, I stood near the ballroom entrance, thanking donors and families as they trickled out into the warm air. That's when I saw the black sedan parked across the street. A pair of figures stepped out and stood beneath the amber streetlight. Regina, Charles, older now, smaller than I remembered. Charles's shoulders had slumped, the way men do when they realize they aren't feared anymore. Regina clutched her purse tightly, like it could shield her from her own shame. They didn't approach. I didn't wave. We just looked at each other. Not long, just enough. I turned back inside. There was no confrontation that night, no closure delivered through shouting or tears, just the absence of hate. And that was enough for me. A week later, I returned to the beach where it all began. The sand was cooler than I expected as the sun dipped low, staining the sky with peach and lavender. I sat with the unopened envelope beside me. For a long time, I stared at it, wondering if forgiveness required a reason. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting, no plea. Just one line. "We never knew how strong you really were." I didn't cry right away. I just let the words sit inside me like warm stones. Heavy, yes, but not crushing. Eventually the tears came, not from pain, from release. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small glass bottle I'd brought with me. Twisting the cap on tight, I waded ankle-deep into the ocean and set it free. The tide caught it quickly, carried it out, just as it had carried so many pieces of me away before. But this time, I was the one doing the letting go. They built their world on lies. I built mine on truth. And the truth is, I'm finally free. As the last light faded, I turned to leave. Some ghosts fade when you forgive them. Others stay, just to remind you that you survived.